There's a strange contradiction at the heart of the modern world. We speak of freedom as our highest value. We praise liberty, celebrate autonomy, and scorn the idea of submission. Yet behind closed doors, something else is happening. Millions willingly live in quiet captivity, not because they are forced to, but because they choose to. And they don't even notice. In a sleek apartment, a man sits in silence. The walls are warm, the food is delivered, the light glows softly from his screen. He scrolls endlessly. There is no pain, no threat, no hunger. Only a dull invisible weight pressing down on his spirit. He tells himself he's lucky, he's safe. But he can't shake the feeling that something inside him is slowly vanishing. This is the paradox of voluntary captivity. It's not new. In 1941, psychoanalyst Erich Fromm described what he called the escape from freedom, a phenomenon where people, terrified of uncertainty, unconsciously submit to systems that give them comfort, structure, and predictability. They don't want chaos. They don't want responsibility. They want to be told who they are, what to do, and how to feel. But the price of this escape is steep. Friedrich Nietzsche called it herd morality, the instinct to trade individuality for safety, greatness for approval, freedom for belonging. In the name of peace, people castrate their own will. They soften their instincts, dull their ambition, and settle into a life of managed obedience. They become, in Nietzsche's words, tame animals. And comfort is the leash. Because it doesn't feel like control. It feels like a reward. The danger isn't that you're being forced into submission. The danger is that you're being made comfortable in your submission. The danger is that the cage is velvet-lined, climate-controlled, and algorithmically personalized. You can stream your distractions. You can order your desires. You can live your entire life without ever facing what you were truly made for. There's no need to rebel. No reason to risk. No hunger that drives you into the wild. And yet, quietly, your soul begins to suffocate, because beneath the softness lies stagnation. Beneath the ease, erosion. Your mind grows numb. Your will weakens. Your potential fades into a background hum of what could have been. You were not born to be safe. You were not made to live in a state of perpetual sedation. But comfort, when unchecked, becomes a form of psychological anesthesia. It disconnects you from the rawness of life, from fear, from joy, from challenge, from pain. It promises peace, but delivers paralysis. You stop growing not because someone stops you, but because nothing demands that you grow. And that is the true tragedy. The most powerful prisons are not built with bars. They are built with screens, subscriptions, and soothing routines. They don't lock you in. They simply convince you that going out isn't worth it. This is not a story about laziness. It's not about people who don't want to succeed. It's about people who were told that comfort was success, that the goal of life is to be undisturbed, that the highest ideal is ease. But what if that's the greatest lie of all? What if the very comfort we cherish is the slow decay of everything that makes us human, our courage, our drive, our hunger for something greater? What if the modern world hasn't liberated us but sedated us? And what if, in seeking to avoid struggle, we've unknowingly surrendered the very thing that gives life meaning, the need to overcome? Imagine a birdcage. Its door is open, but the bird inside doesn't fly, not because it can't, but because it forgot it ever could. Its wings have atrophied. Its memory has faded. It mistakes the cage for home. That bird is us. And the comfort we mistake for peace is the very thing keeping us docile. So what happens when we choose comfort over challenge? Not once, but over and over again? What happens to a generation that no longer feels the call to rise? We're about to find out. It doesn't start as a tragedy. It starts as relief. You sleep in a little longer. You order food instead of cooking. You let the algorithm autoplay the next episode. No harm done. You've earned it. You deserve to relax. But comfort, once tasted, doesn't remain a luxury. It becomes a baseline dot, and slowly, invisibly, it begins to change you. Your brain, wired for challenge and unpredictability, evolved in a world of danger. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors lived in fight or flight, alert, adaptive, and always one step away from hunger, conflict, or death. The brain you carry today is the same one. That kept them alive in that world. But we no longer live in that world. We live in climate-controlled homes, surrounded by soft chairs, instant gratification, and soothing distraction. Stressors are managed. Pain is medicated. Even boredom is annihilated by the flick of a finger, and the brain, ancient and unadapted, begins to malfunction. Dopamine, once a reward for survival behaviors, hunting, solving, achieving, now floods in response to convenience, a swipe, a tap, a scroll. The reward comes effortlessly, and so the brain, confused, stops distinguishing between real accomplishment and artificial stimulation. This is dopamine habituation. The more you indulge, the less it thrills you. The more comfort you consume, the more dull and restless you become. Until eventually, nothing excites you unless it's extreme. And even then, the high is fleeting. Robert Sapolsky, the renowned neuroendocrinologist, describes how chronic ease warps the stress response. Without regular exposure to challenge, the body becomes fragile, the mind intolerant of even minor discomfort. Emotional resilience withers. Patience matters. Initiative dies. The slow poison is not overt. It's not violent. It's subtle, because it feels like peace. But what if comfort isn't peace at all? What if it's a narcotic, not just tolerated, but celebrated? In ancient Rome, the emperors discovered a secret. You don't need to silence dissent. You only need to entertain it. Offer the people bread, offer them circuses, food, and spectacle, and they will forget they were ever meant for more. Today, the bread is Uber Eats. The circus is infinite content. You're not chained. You're just full. Too full to fight. Too sedated to dream. Comfort, in its chronic form, doesn't just numb the senses. It numbs the will. It weakens the very muscle that drives transformation. Discomfort. Because without discomfort, there's no friction. And without friction, there's no fire. Now ask yourself, how often do you choose ease when effort is needed? How many times have you escaped into comfort rather than confronting the hard thing? Not because you're weak, but because the world has taught you that struggle is unnecessary. You're told that pain is toxic, that stress is failure. That difficulty is a sign something's wrong, but that's a lie. Struggle is not a glitch. It's the engine. Pain is not your enemy. It's your teacher. When a culture treats comfort as sacred, it slowly kills what makes people strong. And when people lose their strength, they become easy to manage. You don't need to censor the population. You just need to keep them content. Let them binge. Let them scroll. Let them numb themselves into irrelevance. Let them slowly turn to stone. Because once the soul is sedated, obedience follows. Comfort has become the perfect drug, administered in plain sight, funded by desire, enforced by habit, and no one questions it, because the addiction feels like rest. But as the poison spreads, it doesn't just weaken the body, it numbs the soul. So the question isn't whether you're addicted. Question is, who profits from your sedation? Most people believe obedience comes from fear, the fear of punishment, violence, or exile. But in the modern world, obedience is not enforced through terror. It's manufactured through pleasure. We don't need chains when we're wrapped in comfort. We don't need guards when we're surrounded by convenience. The system doesn't command us to obey. It simply removes the desire to resist that it gives us what we want. Or, more accurately, what we've been taught to want in Brave New World. Aldous Huxley imagined a society where control wasn't brutal, it was beautiful. Citizens were kept docile not through fear, but through pharmacology, entertainment, and engineered satisfaction. They didn't protest because they had nothing to protest. Everything was designed to feel good, and that's what made it terrifying. Our world has taken Huxley's warning and turned it into a blueprint. Behavioral economists know this. Tech platforms know this. Governments know this. They don't need to create tyrants, just tendencies. Keep the population stimulated. Keep them emotionally fed. Feed them content that soothes, stories that flatter, products that promise effortless happiness. Make sure they never sit still long enough to ask why they feel empty. This is the architecture of obedience. Invisible, intimate, and overwhelmingly effective. Surveillance capitalism doesn't just collect your data, it shapes your desires. Every click is a vote, every delay, a hesitation, every scroll, a symptom. Algorithms learn what keeps you passive, what makes you keep watching, what prevents you from turning off the screen and turning on your mind. The result is a population pacified by preference, not forced into submission, seduced into it. We live in a society that rewards conformity with comfort. Step outside the lines and life becomes harder. Stay within them and you're fed, not just with food, but with identity, validation, and distraction. But there's a cost. Every time you choose ease over effort, indulgence over inquiry, affirmation over truth, you give up a sliver of autonomy. It doesn't feel like a loss. It feels like luxury. But autonomy isn't taken all at once. It's chipped away, eroded, forgotten until one day you no longer remember what it felt like to decide for yourself. This is not some distant dystopia. It's the reality of now. You don't need to imagine. A city of pleasure pods. We already live in it. Your feed is your window. Your preferences are your prison. And the bars are padded with everything you once thought you wanted. So why would anyone leave? Because somewhere deep down, a quiet truth remains. Comfort doesn't liberate. It is soothing. It doesn't nourish potential. It neutralizes it. It doesn't honor your uniqueness. It streamlines it. When everything is easy, nothing matters. When everything is tailored, nothing surprises. When everything is convenient, nothing is challenging. And a life without challenge is not a life. It's an illusion. The system doesn't need to imprison you. It only needs to offer a better couch. But what happens to the human spirit when it's no longer called to rise? What becomes of the soul when it no longer knows the taste of effort, the weight of sacrifice, or the thrill of discovery? This is the quiet tragedy of modern control. It doesn't crush the body. It comforts the mind until the will disappears. And the scariest part? We asked for it. Something vital dies when struggle disappears. Not the body, but something deeper. The part of us that hungers to become more than we are. In a world that has outlawed difficulty, growth becomes a threat. Discomfort becomes taboo. And the self, the real self, withers quietly in the name of ease. We are told that pain is a sign of failure, that hardship is to be avoided, that the ideal life is frictionless. But this vision of life isn't human. It's mechanical. It's sterile. It's dead. Struggle, paradoxically, is the birthplace of meaning. Not in spite of the pain, but because of it. Carl Jung believed that to become whole, a person must face the unconscious, the shadow, the repressed, the unknown. But the path to wholeness is not comfortable. It is brutal. It breaks the ego. It brings us face to face with everything we are afraid to confront, our weakness, our confusion, our shame. But this confrontation is not the end. It's the beginning. In Jung's words, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Friedrich Nietzsche took this even further. His concept of the will to power wasn't about domination over others. It was about overcoming the self, the inner resistance, the passive impulse, the voice that says, stay small. Without that struggle, there is no transformation. Without resistance, the soul has nothing to push against, and so it rots. The myth of the phoenix offers the same truth. Before it can rise, it must burn. Before it is reborn, it must collapse into ash. The fire is not destruction. It is initiation. This is the law of becoming. What does not challenge you cannot change you. Throughout history, the people who altered the world did not do so by choosing ease. They chose discomfort, not because they wanted to suffer, but because the truth demanded a heavier cost than comfort could pay. Socrates drank the poison, not to be a martyr, but because to lie would be a worse death. Gandhi faced prison, ridicule, starvation, not because he enjoyed it, but because justice doesn't bloom in convenience. Malcolm X risked his life to speak truth in a society trained to destroy people like him. Marie Curie spent years in unsafe labs, driven by a pursuit that no one yet understood. None of them were comfortable, but all of them became more than the world allowed them to be. Now ask yourself, what kind of life would they have lived if they had chosen to stay warm, silent, and safe? In the absence of struggle, what is left? Comfort without purpose, existence without transformation, movement without growth. The death of struggle is the death of the soul, and yet we are told to pursue ease, to avoid conflict, to build lives without edges or pain. We are sedated by positivity, swaddled in affirmation, protected from offense, but protection can become imprisonment, and comfort, when worshipped, becomes decay. A generation that does not struggle does not grow. It simply waits, distracted, comfortable, slowly forgetting the sound of its own roar. You were not made to be idle. You were made to rise, not once, but again and again through fire. You were made for trial, for tension, for friction. Because only there, in the discomfort, do you find the next version of yourself. Not the easier version, the truer one. This isn't about glorifying pain. It's about reclaiming the purpose of difficulty. It's about remembering that pressure doesn't just break us, it builds us. A diamond does not form in a cushion. It forms under stress. So what's stopping us from choosing a harder path? What's keeping us from walking barefoot through fire, shedding the illusions we've outgrown? Because on the other side of that fire is something most people never get to see, a self forged, not in comfort, but in courage. We live in a culture obsessed with making everything easier. Faster service, softer language, simpler emotions, tailored content, streamlined lives. At first glance, it seems like progress. What kind of society wouldn't want less suffering, less friction, less conflict? But beneath this polished surface lies a troubling truth. We've begun to worship ease, not just enjoy it. Worship it. From our lifestyles to our morals, we've reshaped the world to be more convenient and less confronting. What used to be rites of passage are now treated as violations. What used to be challenges are now threats. We wrap our children in digital foam padding. We build university campuses like emotional sanctuaries, not intellectual battlegrounds. We install trigger warnings like alarm systems, not to protect from violence, but from discomfort. But when did discomfort become dangerous? Jonathan Haidt, in The Coddling of the American Mind, warned of a generation taught to confuse discomfort with trauma. taught to avoid emotional strain rather than build resilience. In this world, the solution to pain is insulation. The solution to offense is silence. And the solution to uncertainty is algorithmic curation. Filter out what makes you uneasy. Replace it with what you already believe. But what do we lose when we never encounter what challenges us? The answer is stark. We lose the very ability to grow. Marshall McLuhan once said, "The medium is the message." And today, the message is simple. You should never be uncomfortable. Your feeds are tailored. Your entertainment is customized. Your beliefs are mirrored. Your identity is affirmed not because the world knows you, but because the system knows what keeps you calm. This is not compassion. This is cultural infantilization. It's the slow erosion of maturity. The quiet dismantling of resilience. The training of entire populations to believe that the presence of discomfort is the presence of harm. But they are not the same. Discomfort is the tension that stretches us beyond our limits. It is the grit that sharpens the soul. It is the fire that forges moral character. Without it, we become soft, sensitive, fragile. We mistake protection for empowerment. But real empowerment doesn't come from being wrapped in layers. It comes from breaking through them. We are becoming a species that mistakes comfort for virtue and ease for enlightenment. But if everything is easy, nothing is meaningful. Because meaning is born in resistance, in the choice to engage with life, not retreat from it. A society that avoids all discomfort avoids its own evolution. We weren't meant to stay in the womb. But we're building one around ourselves, digital, emotional, ideological. A silk cocoon spun from safety, floating us through life without impact. But eventually, every cocoon must burst. And the question is, will we be ready to emerge? Or will we remain in fetal comfort, forever waiting for a world that no longer demands our transformation? A culture that refuses discomfort is a culture that refuses to grow up, and the longer we float in this manufactured calm, the harder the crash becomes when reality pierces the bubble. We are not fragile. We are unfinished. And discomfort is not our enemy. It is our midwife. So the question remains, are we being cared for, or are we being kept small? What if everything you were running from was the key to who you were meant to become? We've been told a lie so subtle, so pervasive, that we've built entire lives around it. That happiness means the absence of discomfort. That meaning can be found without friction. That we can become ourselves without ever confronting who we are. But the opposite is true. Growth begins the moment comfort ends. And awakening begins the moment you stop avoiding pain. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming a whole, integrated self, not a polished mask. Not a role handed to you by society, but the raw, unified expression of your contradictions, your desires, your fears, and your truth. And that process is not gentle. It's violent, humbling, brutal. It demands that you walk through discomfort, not as punishment, but as purification, because there's no revelation in avoidance. There is only repetition. And the more we avoid discomfort, the more we live in loops, repeating patterns that slowly bury our potential beneath layers of habit and fear. Existentialism makes this clear. Freedom is not given. It is chosen. And that choice is painful, because it comes with the weight of responsibility, the terror of meaninglessness, the death of excuses. But in that void, something extraordinary begins to happen. When you stop expecting life to be easy, when you stop waiting for the world to hand you your purpose, when you turn and face the storm you've spent your life trying to outrun, you discover something shocking. You can endure it. And more than that, you can come through it. The Stoics knew this well. They didn't romanticize pain, but they respected it. They understood that struggle is the only path to inner freedom, not comfort, not control, but the courage to say, "Let it come, I will stand anyway." Because once you stop needing life to be easy, no one can control you anymore. Not the media, not the culture, not your past, not your fears. You become sovereign. That's the awakening. The moment when the simulation begins to crack, when the stories you've been sold about who you are and what life is supposed to be start to crumble. When the bright, curated world of convenience collapses and you step into something real. At first, it's cold, colorless, raw, but slowly as you begin to move, to struggle, to suffer on purpose, something ancient stirs within you. Not the shallow will to succeed, not the borrowed will to please, but the deep, defiant will to become. And with it comes something modern life has tried to delete. Meaning, not a slogan, not a lifestyle brand, but the kind of meaning that burns in your chest, that silences doubt, that makes pain bearable, even beautiful. You see, pain is not the enemy of potential. Avoidance is. We were never meant to float. We were meant to fight, not against others, but against the gravity of our own smallness. You don't need to be rescued. You need to remember who you are when nothing shields you. That is the great awakening. It's not a fantasy. It's not a myth. It's the most grounded thing in the world. The decision to face life, all of it, with open eyes. To stop numbing, to stop escaping, to stop waiting. To say, let it be hard, let it hurt, let it change me, because it will. Not overnight, not cleanly, but deeply. And in that transformation, you will find what you were missing all along. Not ease, not peace, but power. Now the path is clear. Not easy, but real. So what will you choose? This is not a war against pleasure, not a rejection of rest, joy, or peace. It is a war against sedation, against the slow, invisible erosion of potential disguised as convenience, against the quiet surrender of self, traded piece by piece for momentary ease, because comfort, when it becomes your compass, begins to lie. It whispers that you're safe when you're actually stuck. It tells you you're free when you've only stopped moving. It flatters you with softness while robbing you of strength. You begin to forget the taste of hunger, the ache of desire, the sacred discomfort of becoming more than you were yesterday. And so this is your call, not to arms, but to awareness. To wake up before the anesthesia takes full hold. To ask yourself the question you've spent your life avoiding. What has your comfort cost you? The dream you never pursued because it was too uncertain. The truth is you didn't speak because it was too uncomfortable. The path you didn't take because it didn't guarantee applause. This war is not fought with noise, but with quiet choices. It begins in small rebellions, waking earlier than you want to, speaking what you believe before it's popular, stepping into the hard thing before you're ready, because your life, your real life, begins where comfort ends, not in recklessness, but in courage, not in masochism, but in meaning, not in self-denial, but in self-remembering. And no, it won't be easy. You'll be tempted to turn back, to reach for the familiar, to numb the sting. But if you resist, if you stay awake, you'll notice something powerful. Discomfort doesn't kill you. It builds you. Resistance doesn't block the path. It is the path. And fear isn't a wall. It's a door, begging to be walked through. So strike the match, not to burn it all down, but to see clearly, to light the darkness you've been taught to fear, to remind yourself that you were never meant to live in dim rooms and padded cells. You were made to rise, again and again, through friction, through fire, through discomfort. This is the war on comfort, and the battlefield is your everyday life. So choose discomfort, choose awareness, choose the path that demands your soul, not just your silence. Because the moment you do, you stop existing and you start living.